In the quiet hours of the night, when the world softens and the edges of our thoughts begin to blur, there's a strange comfort in wondering about the things that defy everything we understand. This opening section invites the listener into a gentle space where reality loosens its grip, where the familiar shapes of the world become slightly distorted, and where impossible mysteries quietly linger just beyond the reach of logic. We begin with a calm contemplation of what makes a mystery truly impossible, not simply unsolved, but resistant to every explanation we attempt to place upon it. These are the anomalies that survive the passing of centuries, the riddles that outlive the civilizations that first encountered them, and the stories that echo across cultures despite having no clear origin. Here, the narration slowly builds a contrast between the solid ground of scientific knowledge and the shadows that stretch behind it. For every question humanity has answered, countless more remain untouched, waiting patiently in forgotten corners of history and hidden layers of the natural world. The tone remains soft, almost whisper-like, as though these mysteries themselves are fragile and must be approached with care. We reflect on how progress brings clarity, but also reveals new uncertainties, how the brighter our understanding becomes, the more pronounced the surrounding darkness appears. In this interplay of known and unknown, the documentary establishes its purpose, not to solve these impossible mysteries, but to explore them with curiosity, calmness, and wonder. As the narration continues, the audience is guided through a serene meditation on the nature of the unexplained. Why do certain mysteries persist? Why do they refuse to fade, even when the world around them evolves? Some enigmas appear in the archaeological record, others in the sky, some in the whisper of old stories told by firelight. Each one challenges the quiet confidence we place in logic and chronology. The listener is reminded that humanity has always lived alongside the unknown, even in times when superstition ruled or when scientific revolution first ignited. These mysteries have outlasted belief systems, empires, and entire eras. And still, they remain. The narration moves gently into the emotional resonance of these impossible cases. We consider how they stir both comfort and discomfort. Comfort in the idea that the universe is far larger and stranger than we imagine, and discomfort in realizing that certainty is often an illusion. Yet this mixture is precisely what draws people toward mystery, especially in the stillness of night. There is something soothing about letting go of the need to explain everything, allowing the mind to drift into landscapes where logic is optional and imagination is free to roam. The tone remains poetic, offering listeners a sense of drifting through dimly lit corridors of forgotten knowledge. As the introduction nears its transition point, the section highlights how these mysteries are not isolated curiosities. They form a tapestry of human experience. Across continents and centuries, people have stumbled upon clues that should not exist. Footprints in impossible layers of stone, artifacts built with knowledge from an unknown source, sightings of lights or beings that no era could fully describe. Each one is a thread leading deeper into the unknown. Each one is a quiet reminder that our world is not as well mapped as we comfort ourselves into believing. The final moments of this section gently open the door to the journey ahead. With a soft shift in tone, listeners are prepared to step into the first of many historical anomalies, cases where time, logic, and science seem to unravel. The narration promises a calm, steady exploration, reassuring the listener that this is not a journey meant to frighten, but to soothe and awaken their sense of wonder. The world may not always behave according to its own rules, and in recognizing that, we begin to see beauty in the cracks of understanding. And so, with the mind primed and curiosity stirred, the introduction concludes by guiding the audience toward the first deep mystery, ancient footprints found in places and eras where they should never have been. The path into the impossible has been drawn, and the journey now begins. There is something uniquely powerful about a footprint. It is the simplest form of evidence, an impression left behind by a living being a quiet signature pressed into the earth. Footprints carry no embellishment, no story crafted by human hands. They simply exist. And yet, throughout history, certain ancient footprints have done more than hint at the presence of life. They have challenged the entire understanding of when, where, and how that life could have existed. In this section, the listener is invited into a calm but deeply fascinating exploration of those enigmatic tracks. Some carved in a stone long before humans were believed to walk the earth. Others found alongside creatures that should have never encountered us. These are the anomalies that whisper contradictions into the story of evolution and human history. The journey begins with a meditation on time itself. Geological layers act like the pages of a monumental book, each stratum representing thousands or millions of years. When scientists discover a fossil or a footprint, they're essentially reading a sentence from nature's autobiography. But what happens when that sentence appears in the wrong chapter? When footprints that resemble those of humans show up in layers far older than humanity itself. The most famous example, and a profoundly debated one, is the Litoli footprints in Tanzania. These impressions, preserved in volcanic ash, tell of upright beings walking side by side over 3.6 million years ago. While science attributes them to early hominins, their structure and stride often evoke images of modern humans, raising questions about how early our ancestors mastered bipedal movement. The footprints are clear, literal imprints of existence, yet they complicate the timeline we thought was established. From here, the narration guides listeners to even more controversial discoveries, those that seem almost impossible. In several regions around the world, including parts of the American Southwest and the Paluxy River in Texas, researchers and explorers have claimed to find human-like footprints in rock layers belonging to the age of the dinosaurs. While many of these claims have been debunked or labeled misinterpretations, the stories persist, lingering like shadows at the edges of scientific certainty. The calm narration does not sensationalize these accounts, but presents them as part of the broader tapestry of mysterious evidence. A reminder that nature is capable of creating forms that mimic the familiar in ways that can confuse even trained observers. Still, the allure of these prints remains powerful. They embody the classic contrast of known versus unknown, the solid timeline of Earth's history challenged by footprints that seem to walk across it undisturbed. The section also turns its focus to anomalous fossil impressions, footprints of creatures that appear out of place for their time. Some prints suggest advanced species living alongside much earlier ones. Others resemble the shapes of animals never documented in the fossil record. Each impression raises questions, not only about the creatures themselves, but about the processes that preserve their tracks. The ground beneath ancient feet was once soft mud, shifting sand, or wet ash, temporary canvases that somehow survived the crushing weight of ages. What conditions allowed these traces to endure? And what stories do they attempt to tell us? The narration allows listeners to drift through these possibilities gently, letting the wonder be more important than arriving at any single conclusion. As the exploration deepens, the tone remains soothing and reflective. The documentary examines how interpretations of ancient footprints have evolved over time. Where early explorers might have eagerly proclaimed a supernatural explanation, modern researchers often lean toward geological or biological reasoning. Yet, even with advanced technology, there remain prints that do not fit neatly into any category. Some show odd anatomical features, too many toes, unusual curvature, or proportions unlike any known species. Others appear to overlap with tracks that do not belong in the same era, as if two timelines briefly brushed against each other in the sediment. Such anomalies offer a quiet reminder. The fossil record is incomplete, fragmented, and often ambiguous. The narrative gently contrasts scientific investigation with the more mythic interpretations cultures once held. In many ancient societies, unusual footprints were considered sacred marks, traces left by gods, spirits, or legendary beings. They were not scrutinized, but revered. While modern understanding has shifted away from myth, the emotional resonance remains. A footprint invites connection. It is evidence that someone or something stood exactly where we stand now, separated only by the vastness of time. This universality contributes to the enduring fascination with footprints that seem out of place. They humanize the past, even when the past refuses to align with established history. Another layer of mystery arises from the methods used to date such impressions. Radiometric dating and sediment analysis are powerful tools, yet they depend on assumptions about conditions that existed millions of years ago. If those conditions varied in ways we don't fully understand, timelines could shift even slightly. And for some mysteries, even a small shift can open enormous gaps of possibility. This idea is not presented to challenge science, but to explore the humility built into scientific inquiry. The Earth is ancient, complex, and full of variables we may never completely grasp. In that space of uncertainty, footprints become more than physical impressions. They become symbols of how much remains unseen. As the section approaches its gentle closing, the narration invites the listener to imagine the moment these footprints were made. A being, human, hominin, or something entirely unknown, walked across a landscape that no longer exists, unaware that their simple movement would one day ignite debates spanning continents and centuries. The wind, the ash, the soil, the pressure of time, all conspired to preserve that fleeting step. These traces from the past carry a sense of intimacy, as though the ancient world is reaching forward to touch the present. The transition toward the next section is gradual and peaceful. If footprints can challenge our understanding of who walked the earth and when, then what about the objects those beings may have carried or created? The introduction to impossible artifacts begins to form here, like a soft whisper behind the final sentences. Human history, it suggests, is not written solely in bones and footprints. It is also etched into the tools, devices, and creations that survive the ages. Some mysteries leave behind footprints. Others leave behind objects, solid, crafted, unmistakably intentional. And it is within these objects that some of the most unsettling contradictions emerge. Unlike footprints shaped by nature and preserved by chance, artifacts are born from purposeful creation. They require knowledge, skill, and intent. This section gently guides the listener into the world of anomalous artifacts, the items that appear centuries or even millennia ahead of their time. These are the relics that whisper of forgotten genius, lost civilizations, or possibilities we have not yet imagined. The tone remains soft and contemplative, allowing wonder to unfold slowly as we examine objects that stand defiantly out of place in the historical record. The journey begins with the Antikythera mechanism, often referred to as the world's first analog computer. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, this device is composed of intricate gears with precise mathematical relationships, construction far beyond what historians believed ancient Greeks were capable of. Even modern engineers study the mechanism with astonishment, marveling at its complexity and purpose. How did such advanced mechanical knowledge appear in a period where technological developments were thought to be rudimentary? The contrast between the ancient world's known achievements and the sophistication required to build this device becomes a quiet, compelling tension for the listener. It serves as a reminder that human ingenuity may peak and fade in cycles, leaving behind relics that appear impossibly advanced when compared to the surviving records. From Greece, the narration smoothly transitions to Mesopotamia and the enigmatic Baghdad battery. This small clay pot containing metal components resembles a primitive battery, though no one knows exactly what it was used for. Was it a scientific experiment, a tool for electroplating, or something entirely different? The uncertainty surrounding it invites reflection on the gaps in our understanding of ancient cultures. We often assume people of the past lacked advanced scientific concepts, but artifacts like this challenge that assumption quietly yet powerfully. Their existence implies knowledge that did not survive in written form. The idea that civilizations may have developed and lost technologies long before our current era creates an atmosphere of contemplative mystery. Next, the listener is invited to consider the crystal skulls, carved from quartz with astonishing precision. While many have been linked to more recent craftsmanship, a few still provoke debate due to their exceptional smoothness and unexplained tooling marks. The calm narration emphasizes not the controversies, but the deeper idea that artifacts can become symbols of mystery, regardless of their origin. Whether crafted by ancient hands or by artisans of the last few centuries, the crystal skulls embody the human fascination with the boundary between myth and craftsmanship. Their presence in museums and private collections continues to spark questions about the limits of ancient artistry and the stories cultures shape around objects of beauty and enigma. The section expands to discuss other anomalous objects: metal spheres unearthed in South Africa, carved stones bearing astronomical alignments, and tools found embedded in geological layers seemingly far too old to contain human artifacts. Some of these finds have scientific explanations, others remain unresolved. The narration remains balanced, acknowledging skepticism while keeping the sense of wonder alive. These objects, whether misunderstood or truly anomalous, share a common theme. They do not fit neatly into the timelines we have constructed. They disrupt the flow of accepted history, creating ripples that force us to reconsider what we think we know. This naturally leads into a reflection on the fragility of historical knowledge. Written records can erode, oral traditions can distort, and entire technological systems can vanish with the collapse of a civilization. What remains is often scattered, isolated pieces of a puzzle we can no longer fully assemble. The listener is encouraged to imagine how many breakthroughs may have been lost, leaving behind only incomplete fragments. A single object might be the remnant of a broader innovation that disappeared without a trace. This notion creates a quiet reverence for the artifacts that have survived, as they provide rare windows into forgotten eras of creativity and discovery. As the exploration deepens, the narrative draws a gentle contrast between certainty and possibility. Archaeologists, historians, and scientists each bring valuable perspectives, yet even their combined knowledge cannot fully explain every artifact. Some objects resist categorization, as though deliberately crafted to challenge the boundaries of logic. They evoke questions not only about who made them, but why. What inspired such innovation? What purpose did these creations serve? Were they everyday tools, ceremonial items, or glimpses of experiments far ahead of their time? The soothing pace allows listeners to drift through these questions without pressure to resolve them. The narration then acknowledges the role of human interpretation. Throughout history, people have looked at mysterious objects and projected meaning onto them, sometimes grounded in cultural understanding, other times born from imagination. This interplay between fact and interpretation enriches the mystery rather than diminishing it. Even when explanations arise, the sense of wonder often lingers. After all, every artifact tells two stories, one about the past and one about the people who seek to understand it. This duality becomes a calming, philosophical thread as the section approaches its transition. Toward the closing, the listener is guided to reflect on the broader implication of these anomalous objects. If artifacts can exist without clear origins, and if technological knowledge can appear unexpectedly advanced, then what else might be hidden in the layers of history? What discoveries lie buried beneath untouched soil or deep oceans, waiting to shift our understanding of human potential yet again? The world is vast, and time is long. Far too long for us to assume we have uncovered all of its secrets. With this gentle sense of anticipation, the section begins to transition into the next topic. If objects can defy expectations and timelines, then the very landscapes that hold them can also behave in mysterious ways. The Earth itself becomes the next source of anomaly, a stage upon which nature writes mysteries in stone, light, and motion. As the final sentences settle into silence, the narrative softly opens the path toward the next exploration. The places around the world that rewrite geography and challenge the very laws of nature. There are locations on this planet that seem to operate according to their own rules. Places where the land behaves in ways that defy both expectation and explanation. In this section, the listener is gently carried across landscapes that function almost like characters in a story. Ancient, unpredictable, and quietly sentient. These are the regions where geography bends, where natural forces blur into the mysterious, and where the earth itself seems to whisper of forgotten secrets. Through calm narration, we explore environments that confound scientists, intrigue travelers, and invite a deeper contemplation of how much of our world remains beyond understanding. The journey begins in one of the most puzzling deserts on Earth, Death Valley in California. Within its parched basin lies Racetrack Playa, home to the famous sailing stones, large rocks that appear to move across the flat, cracked mud floor, leaving long trails etched behind them. For decades, no one witnessed the stones in motion. They simply shifted positions, sometimes traveling hundreds of meters, as though pulled by an invisible force. Theories emerged: magnetism, strong winds, even supernatural influence, but none fully satisfied the curious. Recently, scientists captured the stones moving slowly across a thin sheet of ice driven by a gentle breeze. Yet, even with this explanation, the sense of wonder lingers. The phenomenon illustrates the delicate interplay between rare natural conditions that must align perfectly for such movement to occur. The stones remind us that even familiar elements, ice, wind, and rock, can produce results that feel impossible when their union is rare enough to escape regular observation. From the desert, the narration moves to Norway's Hessdalen Valley, a remote region known for strange luminous phenomena that appear in the sky. These glowing orbs, sometimes drifting, sometimes darting, hover above the valley with an almost sentient fluidity. They have been recorded for decades, yet their origin remains elusive. While some researchers propose plasma formations or ionized dust, others believe the lights represent an unclassified atmospheric or geological process. Unlike many mysteries that fade over time, the Hessdalen lights continue to appear, calmly defying attempts to categorize them. The contrast between the valley's quiet, cold landscape and the vivid energy of the lights creates an atmosphere of dreamlike surrealism. This is a place where the boundary between natural wonder and the unknown thins to transparency. The listener is then brought beneath the ocean's surface to the submerged coastline of Yanaguni, Japan. There, divers discovered massive underwater formations, terraces, platforms, and what appear to be step-like structures carved from stone. Debate surrounds their origin. Are they remnants of a lost civilization submerged after the last ice age, or are they natural formations shaped through erosion and fracturing? The Yanaguni monument is shaped with such geometric precision that imagination often rushes ahead of evidence. It inspires thoughts of forgotten cities, vanished cultures, and human history stretching deeper than we dare assume. Even if the structures are natural, their appearance reveals nature's extraordinary ability to sculpt forms that mimic man-made architecture. The sea, with its relentless currents and ancient power, becomes both artist and archivist of its own mysteries. From underwater ruins, the narrative glides to landscapes shaped by forces that seem, at first glance, too precise to be accidental. Consider the perfectly circular sinkholes of the Middle East or Mexico's cenotes that hide vast subterranean cave systems. These openings in the earth often form unexpectedly and rapidly, swallowing land with startling symmetry. While geology provides a framework for understanding such events, the suddenness with which these formations appear adds an element of eerie unpredictability. They remind us that beneath the ground we walk upon lies a world as dynamic and volatile as the sky above. Throughout this exploration, the tone remains soothing and slow-paced, inviting reflection rather than fear. Each mysterious place serves as a gentle reminder that human mapping, surveying, and categorizing can only capture a fraction of the Earth's complexity. We assume stability, yet the land is constantly shifting, breathing, and transforming. Mountains rise and erode, rivers carve new paths, and coastlines reshape themselves over centuries. Some of these transformations happen gradually, unnoticed by the generations who inhabit them. Others leave behind evidence so striking that they command attention across continents. The narration then transitions to locations that produce sensory illusions, geographical anomalies where perception becomes untrustworthy. Gravity hills, for instance, seem to pull objects uphill, though the effect is merely a clever interplay of perspective and landscape contour. Even knowing the scientific explanation, visitors often describe a lingering sense of confusion or enchantment. These places exemplify the contrast between what our senses tell us and what reality actually is. They remind listeners that mystery does not always arise from the supernatural. Sometimes it emerges from the limitations of human perception. As the section continues, attention is gently turned to places where magnetism behaves strangely. The Oregon Vortex in the United States and similar locations around the world have long been associated with odd optical distortions and subtle shifts in balance. Whether explained by science or folklore, these regions provoke a sense of disorientation that feels almost magical. The calm narration emphasizes that mystery and natural explanation can coexist without diminishing one another. A phenomenon need not be supernatural to inspire awe. It simply needs to reveal a side of nature we rarely see. Gradually, the listener is guided to consider the emotional and cultural impact these places have had over centuries. Travelers, pilgrims, and scholars have visited such regions not only to solve their mysteries, but to experience the wonder they evoke. These landscapes become more than geographical anomalies. They become sites of storytelling, myth-making, and reflection. They remind us that the Earth is capable of producing phenomena that challenge our assumptions in quiet, elegant ways. As the section approaches its closing, the narrative weaves these diverse landscapes into a unified theme. Whether it is stones gliding across desert plains, lights dancing above Norwegian valleys, or ocean-carved architecture lying beneath the waves, each phenomenon demonstrates the same fundamental truth. The world is far more intricate than our maps can capture. Geography, like history, contains chapters we have not fully read and patterns we have not fully recognized. The transition into the next section begins to form naturally. If the land and sea can surprise us with enigmas, then the sky, vast, ancient, and filled with its own secrets, must be equally capable of presenting mysteries that defy logic. As the listener drifts toward this idea, the closing lines of the section open a soft pathway into the next exploration, the strange behaviors and impossible events witnessed in the skies above us. The sky has always been humanity's oldest and most enigmatic canvas. Long before maps were drawn or history was written, people gazed upward and searched for meaning in the shifting lights above. Stars, comets, clouds, and shadows drifting across the heavens shaped myths, guided travelers, and inspired entire cosmologies. Yet throughout recorded history, there have been moments when the sky behaved in ways that defied not only ancient understanding, but even modern scientific explanation. In this section, the listener is invited into a gentle exploration of aerial mysteries, phenomena that hover between natural wonder and the unexplained, offering glimpses of a world where logic briefly loosens its hold. The journey begins with historical accounts of strange celestial events that startled ancient civilizations. One example is the phenomenon of sky battles, described in medieval European records. Witnesses reported seeing objects shaped like spears, shields, and orbs clashing in the heavens, their movements resembling armies locked in combat. While modern interpretations suggest these may have been atmospheric optical illusions or misidentified natural events, the vividness of the descriptions continues to intrigue historians. The contrast between the calm, predictable firmament and the violent imagery these witnesses describe creates a lingering tension, an invitation to consider how the sky can shift from serene to unsettling in a moment. From the Middle Ages, the narration transitions to the early 20th century when pilots first began navigating the open sky. These aviators entered a realm few humans had experienced before, and their reports added a new layer to aerial mysteries. Some pilots described encountering shimmering objects that moved against the wind, while others reported lights that paced their aircraft with uncanny precision. These sightings occurred long before the modern era of advanced aviation technology, which makes their descriptions particularly compelling. The tone of the narration remains soft and reflective, focusing not on sensational claims, but on the quiet awe experienced by individuals witnessing something they could not name. One of the most famous historical sky mysteries is the event at Fatima in 1917, often called the Miracle of the Sun. Thousands of people gathered to witness a predicted apparition and reported seeing the sun dance, spin, or change colors. While scientists later proposed explanations ranging from retinal distortion to atmospheric effects, the collective nature of the experience makes it difficult to categorize neatly. The sky became a stage for a phenomenon that blended faith, perception, and natural optics in a way that still invites gentle wonder today. The narration uses this event to explore the idea that sometimes it is not the phenomenon itself, but the shared experience that makes a mystery endure. Gradually, the narrative shifts toward modern phenomena, lights, shapes, and aerial behaviors that refuse easy classification. Among them are the Foo Fighters, reported by World War II pilots. These glowing orbs followed aircraft with intelligent-seeming movements, neither hostile nor random, appearing as though they were curious observers rather than threats. Their presence across multiple regions and multiple years raises questions about atmospheric conditions not yet understood, or perhaps entirely new kinds of natural electrical phenomena. The calm pacing encourages the listener to drift through these possibilities without the need for firm conclusions. Throughout the section, the narration makes a gentle distinction between known atmospheric phenomena and those that fall outside current scientific frameworks. For instance, ball lightning is a rare but documented event, a glowing sphere of electrical energy that appears during thunderstorms. Yet many reported sky anomalies occur in clear, calm weather, defying association with known conditions. These moments highlight the thin line between the familiar and the extraordinary. The sky, vast and ordinary in our daily lives, can transform into a realm of impossibility with little warning. Another thread woven into this exploration is how cultural interpretation shapes the meaning of sky events. Ancient societies often viewed celestial anomalies as omens or divine messages. Modern observers, steeped in technology and science, may assume advanced machinery or unknown physics. Yet the core emotional response is the same across time: awe, uncertainty, and a deep sense of witnessing something outside routine experience. This continuity across eras creates a soothing narrative rhythm, showing that mystery is a universal human companion. As the section deepens, the tone remains calm and contemplative. The listener is guided through lesser-known, yet equally fascinating reports. Phantom comets that appeared once and vanished from the sky forever, brilliant streaks of light with no traceable origin, and formations of luminous objects that moved with synchronized precision. Some accounts come from astronomers themselves, individuals trained to observe the sky with precision, yet surprised by lights behaving outside natural patterns. The presence of expert witnesses does not transform the unknown into the known, but it adds weight to the mysteries that remain unresolved. The narration also touches gently on the limitations of human perception. The sky is vast, and our vantage point is small. Clouds can distort light in ways that mimic structure. The atmosphere can bend reflections from distant sources. The brain can stitch patterns into randomness. Yet even with these logical explanations available, some sightings hold details too specific or too consistent to dismiss. This interplay between illusion and authenticity enriches the listener's sense of wonder, emphasizing that mystery thrives in the space between certainty and possibility. As the section approaches its close, the narrative prepares to shift from skyward mysteries to those grounded on Earth, living mysteries that walk, swim, or lurk just beyond the boundaries of scientific classification. Before that transition, the listener is offered a final moment of reflection. The sky has always been a realm of beauty and unpredictability, a canvas for both natural phenomena and deep human imagination. It is a reminder that even with satellites, telescopes, and modern instruments, the heavens still hold secrets we cannot fully interpret. With a gentle exhale of narrative calm, the section ends by guiding the listener downward, from the vast unknown above to the mysterious creatures below. The next exploration begins not in the distant sky, but on the Earth's surface, where legends and sightings of impossible beings have quietly persisted for centuries. Across every continent, in every era, people have told stories of creatures that seem to exist just beyond the edge of understanding. Beings glimpsed in forests, lakes, and uncharted regions that refuse to surrender their secrets. In this section, the listener is drawn into a calm, atmospheric exploration of such creatures. Not monsters designed to frighten, but living mysteries that challenge the limits of zoology and the assumptions of recorded history. These beings are described in ancient manuscripts, carved into temple walls, whispered in folklore, and occasionally reported in modern times. Whether real, misunderstood, or symbolic, they occupy the fascinating space between myth and biological possibility. The journey begins in the dense, shadowed rainforests of Central Africa, home to legends of the Mokombembe. For generations, local communities have spoken of a large creature resembling a sauropod dinosaur, living in remote swamps and hiding beneath murky waters. Western explorers in the early 20th century recorded these stories with intrigue. Some even claimed to see unusual disturbances in the water or hear powerful bellows echoing through the wilderness. While no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced, the persistence of the accounts invites a gentle curiosity. The calm narration emphasizes not the pursuit of fear, but the idea that ecosystems as vast and unexplored as the Congo Basin could still harbor secrets, perhaps creatures surviving in pockets untouched for millennia. From Africa, the narrative drifts across oceans and centuries, arriving in medieval Europe. The texts and illustrations of the time described strange beings such as the blemmies, humanoid figures with faces embedded in their chests. While historians often interpret these accounts as symbolic or exaggerated stories from distant travelers, the imagery reveals how unfamiliar creatures were processed through cultural imagination. Medieval scholars didn't merely record animals. They tried to reconcile every new sighting with their worldview. The blemmies represent more than biological mystery. They symbolize the human struggle to categorize the unknown in a world still vast and unmapped. Their place in history shows how sightings of unfamiliar people or animals might have been transformed into legends that persist long after their truth is forgotten. The narration then moves toward the vast oceans, where the majority of Earth's biodiversity remains hidden. Sailors and explorers throughout history described sea creatures of impossible scale. Serpents with shimmering scales, massive shapes drifting beneath the waves, and beings that surfaced only briefly before slipping back into darkness. While some of these accounts may reflect encounters with whales, giant squids, or other known marine animals, a lingering portion remains unexplained. The sea's depth and darkness become part of the mystery, a reminder that the oceans hold more unknown species than known ones. In the soothing tone of the documentary, the listener is guided to imagine how a single creature surfacing momentarily could spark generations of legends simply by defying expectation. Next, attention shifts to the Arctic and subarctic regions, where cold, fog, and isolation create ideal conditions for misinterpretation and for genuine anomalies. Indigenous accounts speak of immense white creatures larger than bears, moving with startling intelligence, or of aquatic beings beneath the ice with shapes unfamiliar to modern science. Explorers documented unusual tracks in the snow, strikingly large and spaced far apart, as though belonging to a creature with an enormous stride. While many footprints were later attributed to ice expansion or overlapping animal tracks, others defy easy explanation. The contrast between the stark, silent landscapes and the possibility of unknown creatures living within them builds a calm sense of wonder rather than fear. The narrative continues into Asia, where tales of impossible creatures blend with centuries-old cultural traditions. From the elusive yet reverent stories of the Naga, serpentine beings inhabiting rivers and lakes, to accounts of mountain dwellers encountering ape-like figures resembling the Yeti, Asia holds a deep archive of enigmatic creature lore. Modern expeditions have uncovered footprints, hair samples, or sounds that remain unidentified, though none provide definitive proof. Still, the persistence of these accounts across generations and regions suggests something intriguing. Perhaps the line between myth and reality is thinner than assumed, or perhaps humans have always sensed the presence of rare, hidden species on the edges of daily life. The tone remains soft as the narration explores the idea that many historical descriptions of mysterious creatures may reflect encounters with species that later went extinct. The world has seen countless extinctions, some documented, many not. A creature described as impossible today may simply belong to a lineage that did not survive into the modern era or survived only in isolated pockets. Fossil discoveries routinely introduce new species that reshape our understanding of biological diversity, suggesting that the Earth's catalog of life is far from complete. This gentle acknowledgement of nature's complexity helps the listener view these creature accounts not as fantasies, but as reminders of how little of the natural world we truly grasp. The section also touches on the emotional dimension of these mysteries. Humans have always looked to nature with a mix of curiosity and humility. When explorers encountered unfamiliar animals, such as the first European sightings of gorillas, platypuses, or giant squids, these beings were once considered impossible too. Their existence was dismissed until evidence became undeniable. This historical perspective invites the listener to remain open-minded. What seems impossible today may one day be classified, studied, and accepted. The creatures of legend may not be supernatural. They may simply be undiscovered. As the section nears its transition, the narration reflects on why stories of mysterious creatures endure. They speak to a human desire to believe that the world is not fully mapped, not fully known. These beings, whether glimpsed or imagined, offer a reminder that nature is alive with hidden possibilities. They challenge the neat boundaries of science and remind us that uncertainty is part of the experience of living on a dynamic planet. The final part of the section shifts gently toward the next theme. If creatures can appear unexpectedly, seemingly from nowhere, then perhaps the same can be said of people. History contains its own share of individuals whose presence, identity, or origin remains unexplained, leaving footprints not just on land, but within the narratives of entire cultures. With this thought, the transition toward the next section begins to take form, guiding the listener from the wild mysteries of the natural world to the strange stories of humans who emerged from nowhere and challenged every assumption about identity and reality. History is filled not only with strange creatures and ancient anomalies, but also with people, ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in origin, who seem to emerge from nowhere. These individuals left behind questions that no investigation, no official record, and no historical archive has ever been able to answer. In this section, the listener is guided into a calm, introspective exploration of such mysterious figures. Their stories are not frightening. Instead, they carry a quiet, haunting beauty, like forgotten pages from time itself. These are people whose identities defied every attempt at explanation, wanderers who stepped into history briefly and then vanished, leaving behind puzzles that continue to echo through the centuries. The journey begins with one of the most famous cases, the man from Taured. In 1954, at a Tokyo airport, an ordinary-looking traveler reportedly presented a passport from a country that didn't exist. He claimed Taured was located between France and Spain, yet officials found no such nation on any map. The man became increasingly confused, believing the error lay not with him, but with the world around him. What makes this story particularly chilling and oddly poetic is its calmness. There was no spectacle, no dramatic incident, just a quiet conversation in a customs office, followed by a disappearance that left authorities baffled. The man's hotel room, guarded overnight, was found empty the next morning. No documents, no suitcase, no trace. The narration explores this story gently, framing it not as evidence of alternate realities, but as an illustration of how intricately human identity is tied to geography, and how disorienting it becomes when that geography refuses to align with memory. The narrative then moves further back in time to medieval England, where the tale of the green children of Woolpit has been retold for centuries. Two children, described as having green-tinted skin and speaking a language unknown to anyone in the region, appeared suddenly near the village of Woolpit. They wore unfamiliar clothing and claimed to come from a place called St. Martin's Land, a world perpetually covered in twilight. Over time, the boy fell ill and passed away, but the girl adapted, learned English, and eventually integrated into society. Yet her origins remained a mystery she could never fully explain. The calm storytelling here focuses not on the supernatural, but on the emotional depth of displacement. These children, rooted in known culture, symbolize the way history occasionally produces individuals whose stories fall outside all logical frameworks. The narration gently transitions to the 19th century, where another puzzling case emerges, the boy known as Caspar Hauser. Found wandering the streets of Nuremberg in 1828 with barely any language and almost no understanding of the world, Caspar claimed to have spent his entire life in a small, dark room. His sudden appearance sparked widespread curiosity. Some believed he was a lost prince. Others thought he was a victim of deception or imprisonment. But what makes Caspar's story enduring is not the theories. It is the profound humanity of a young man learning the world for the first time. His difficulties, his strange knowledge gaps, and the mystery of his later death all contribute to a narrative that feels suspended between tragedy and unsolved enigma. The listener is encouraged to reflect on how identity can be shaped or erased by forces unknown. As the narration unfolds, attention turns to individuals whose inexplicable behavior suggests origins beyond typical human experience. Some historical accounts describe strangers appearing with unusual accents, unfamiliar customs, or knowledge that doesn't match their surroundings. Others tell of travelers who arrived in cities claiming to be from countries or regions no one had ever heard of. These stories are often scattered across old police reports, diaries, and newspapers, creating a subtle mosaic of anomalies. While many encounters can be explained through confusion, illness, or deception, a number of them resist such clarity. The calm tone invites the listener to imagine how bewildering it must have been for both sides, the mysterious individual and the society trying to interpret them. Another layer of mystery comes from people who possess knowledge they should not have had. Certain historical figures appeared knowing languages they had no opportunity to learn or describing distant lands they had never traveled to. These accounts, though rare, gently blur the line between coincidence and impossibility. Rather than presenting them as supernatural, the narration encourages the listener to consider how vast and varied human cognition can be. Memory, intuition, and perception are not fully understood, and sometimes they manifest in ways that feel like glimpses into alternate pathways of experience. The narrative then reflects on the psychological and emotional dimension of such encounters. A person arriving from nowhere disrupts not just geographical certainty, but the comforting idea that identity is easily defined. Who are we without our origins? How much of our sense of self depends on the recognition of others? These mysterious individuals often appeared disoriented, frightened, or deeply confused, not because they were strange, but because the world they entered felt strange to them. This perspective adds a soft, humanizing layer to their stories, transforming them from curiosities into poignant reminders of how fragile and delicate identity can be. As the section approaches its closing, the listener is guided to consider the symbolic meaning behind stories of people with no traceable past. Perhaps they represent the gaps in historical record-keeping, the lost communities whose memories were never preserved. Perhaps they symbolize the many individuals throughout history who slipped between the cracks, their lives undocumented and their stories forgotten. Or perhaps, in a more mysterious sense, they remind us that the world is not as closed or as neatly organized as we imagine. There are still borders, geographical, psychological, and temporal, that we do not fully understand. The transition to the next section emerges naturally from this reflection. If individuals can appear without warning and without explanation, then what of entire civilizations that disappeared just as mysteriously? The world holds not only the puzzle of isolated wanderers, but also the sweeping enigmas of great cultures that flourished, thrived, and then faded into silence. With this soft shift in focus, the path opens toward the next exploration. Lost civilizations whose vanishing acts remain among the greatest mysteries in human history. Across the vast expanse of human history, civilizations have risen with brilliance, flourished with complexity, and then, sometimes without warning, disappeared into silence. Their ruins remain scattered across deserts, jungles, and coastlines like quiet reminders of worlds that once existed, worlds whose stories are only partially told. In this section, the listener is gently guided through the mysteries of these vanished civilizations, not with urgency or fear, but with a calm curiosity. These are societies that left behind cities, scripts, monuments, and technologies, yet no clear explanation for their decline. Their disappearance echoes the earlier mysteries of individuals who appeared from nowhere, but on a scale that affects entire populations and entire chapters of history. The journey begins with the Indus Valley Civilization, one of the most advanced societies of the ancient world. Its cities, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and many others, were models of urban planning, complete with sophisticated drainage systems, standardized weights, and architectural precision unrivaled for their time. Yet the people who built these cities left behind no deciphered written record, no chronicle explaining who they were or why their civilization collapsed. As the narration unfolds in a soothing tone, listeners are encouraged to imagine vibrant marketplaces, quiet homes, and bustling streets that once filled these cities, now reduced to stone and dust. The contrast between their remarkable achievements and their mysterious disappearance creates a gentle sense of wonder. Climate change, shifting rivers, or internal decline may have contributed, yet no single explanation fully captures the suddenness and scale of their vanishing. From the river valleys of South Asia, the narrative drifts to the Mediterranean, where the sea peoples entered history like a storm with no origin. Around 1200 BCE, these enigmatic groups swept across the region, attacking powerful empires such as Egypt and the Hittites. Their identity remains unknown. No homeland, no clear culture, no definitive archaeological footprint. They appear in historical records the way a ghost appears in a dream, sudden, disruptive, and impossible to place. The calm narration emphasizes this strangeness, presenting the sea peoples not as invaders, but as a civilization on the move, driven by forces invisible to us. Their brief but dramatic impact reshaped the political landscape of the ancient world, yet their ultimate fate remains as mysterious as their arrival. The section then guides the listener to Mesoamerica, where the collapse of the Maya elite still raises questions centuries later. The Maya were masters of astronomy, architecture, mathematics, and writing, constructing towering pyramids and intricate cities deep within a jungle. Yet around the 9th century, many major Maya cities were abruptly abandoned. The jungle consumed them, leaving behind stone structures entwined with roots and vines. The people themselves did not vanish entirely. Their descendants live across the region today, but the societal structure that built their great cities dissolved. The reasons remain uncertain, perhaps drought, warfare, environmental strain, or political fragmentation. The narration encourages the listener to imagine the moment when a grand city square that had echoed with ceremonies and celebrations fell silent, replaced by the soft sounds of leaves stirring in the wind. The transition from a thriving civilization to a forgotten ruin is presented as both haunting and profoundly beautiful. Next, the narration visits the mysterious Nuragic civilization on the island of Sardinia, known primarily through its thousands of stone towers called nurigs. These structures, some resembling ancient fortresses and others appearing ceremonial, the landscape like ancient sentinels. Yet little is known about the people who built them. Their written language, cultural identity, and reasons for decline remain elusive. Excavations reveal a society that traded widely and constructed impressive architecture, then slowly faded from the historical record. This gentle mystery invites listeners to reflect on how entire cultures can drift into obscurity even while leaving behind monumental architecture. Turning toward the Pacific, the narrative explores the enigmatic disappearance of the Rapa Nui culture on Easter Island. The island's monumental moai statues, carved from volcanic rock and transported miles across rugged terrain, stand as silent witnesses to a society of remarkable ingenuity. Yet the people who created them faced environmental collapse, societal strain, and possibly external pressures. The calm narration does not dwell on the collapse as tragedy, but rather as a poignant reminder of how fragile human civilizations can be when confronted with limited resources. The moai, with their serene expressions, embody both the grandeur and the vulnerability of human achievement. Throughout the section, the listener is invited to consider a broader theme. Civilizations do not disappear without leaving traces of their lives, but the reasons behind their decline often remain hidden in the spaces between artifacts. Nature reclaims cities, records fade, and oral traditions dissolve over time. What remains are fragments, stone carvings, buried objects, abandoned streets, that encourage interpretation but resist definitive answers. This is where history blends softly into mystery, creating that perfect contrast between evidence and uncertainty. As the narration deepens, it reflects on the possibility that some civilizations may have suffered cascading failures, series of events that, individually survivable, became catastrophic when combined. Climate shifts, declining resources, disease, political turmoil, any or all may have played a role. Yet even with scientific methods, satellite imagery, and archaeological techniques, many questions remain open. The not knowing becomes part of the allure. Listeners are reminded that history is not a complete book. It is a collection of surviving pages from countless lost volumes. The emotional thread of the section emerges gently, the realization that human societies are temporary, yet their mysteries endure far beyond their lifetimes. These civilizations may have vanished, but their stories continue to be written by those who seek to understand them. Their ruins spark curiosity, their artifacts stir imagination, and their unanswered questions create a soft resonance that spans centuries. As the section begins to transition, the narration poses a quiet reflection. If entire civilizations can fade into the unknown, might their memories linger in unexpected ways? Through stories, symbols, or traditions carried across generations. Which leads naturally into the next theme, mysteries of memory, knowledge, and recollection that appear in places they should not exist at all. There are mysteries that linger not in ruins or artifacts, but in memory, fragile, shifting, and profoundly human. In this section, the listener is guided into a softer, more introspective realm of the unexplained, where stories arise from the minds of individuals who seem to recall things they should have no way of knowing. These are memories that feel borrowed from other lives, knowledge carried across generations without written records, and stories preserved with impossible accuracy. The tone remains calm and dreamlike, inviting the audience to reflect on the strange relationship between memory and time. The journey begins with accounts of children who speak of past lives in startling detail. Across many cultures, there are stories of young children describing former homes, families, or events they were never exposed to. In some rare cases, their descriptions match real places or individuals who lived before they were born. Whether these memories represent coincidence, imagination, or something deeper, their clarity unsettles the boundary between identity and experience. The narration gently avoids sensational claims and instead focuses on the emotional and philosophical weight of such recollections. How do memories form? And what do we truly inherit from the world around us, physically, psychologically, or spiritually? From individual memory, the narrative widens to consider collective remembrance. Certain indigenous cultures possess oral traditions that recount astronomical events from thousands of years earlier, events modern science has only recently verified, such as supernovae or ancient volcanic eruptions. The precision of these stories defies the assumption that unwritten knowledge quickly erodes across time. Some traditions have preserved details with such accuracy that they read almost like encoded historical records disguised as myth. This contrast between the expected fragility of memory and the astonishing resilience of these narratives deepens the sense of wonder. It suggests that history may endure in ways we do not fully understand. The narration then explores instances where individuals suddenly acquire knowledge they seemingly never learned. Cases of spontaneous language recall, flashes of familiarity with unknown places, or intuitive mastery of skills become quiet examples of memory behaving in unexpected ways. While science offers possible explanations, latent memory, subconscious processing, neurological anomalies, the mystery lies in the rarity and precision of these events. The listener is not pushed toward any conclusion. Instead, they are invited to rest in the nuance, appreciating how vast and uncharted the human mind still is. As the section continues, the focus shifts to ancient stories that appear across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. Flood myths, celestial visits, and tales of lost lands emerge repeatedly throughout human history, each told with different imagery, but carrying the same structural core. How did these stories travel so far without written exchange? Were they born from shared psychological archetypes? Or did ancient people witness events so monumental that their echoes spread across the world? The calm narration presents these ideas not as answers, but as contemplative questions, softly opening pathways of imagination. Toward the end, the section begins to bridge gently toward the next theme. If memories and stories can transcend their origins, if knowledge can appear where it should not, then perhaps the boundaries of time itself are more flexible than we assume. The mysterious persistence of these stories suggests that the past is not entirely confined to history. It may brush lightly against the present in ways we do not recognize. With this thought, the transition into Section 10 begins to form naturally. The narrative prepares to shift from human memory to the phenomenon of time behaving unpredictably, moments when people feel they have stepped briefly into another era or witnessed something that should belong to a different point in history. The mysteries of memory now open the door to the mysteries of time itself. Time is the one element of existence humans believe they understand best. It moves forward, steady and predictable, carrying us from moment to moment like a gentle river. Yet throughout history, people have described experiences that defy this comfortable certainty. Moments when time seems to fold, distort, or temporarily reveal another era. In this section, the listener is guided into a soft, contemplative exploration of time slips, those fleeting episodes where the past and present appear to overlap. The tone remains calm and immersive, treating these accounts not as frightening anomalies, but as rare, delicate disturbances in the familiar rhythm of reality. The journey begins with the well-known Moberly, Jourdain incident of 1901. Two schoolteachers visiting the gardens of Versailles described suddenly finding themselves in a version of the landscape that appeared centuries older. They claimed the light changed, the atmosphere grew heavy, and figures in period clothing moved around them as though unaware of their presence. Later, when they attempted to retrace their steps, they could not locate the same paths or structures again. Whether their experience was psychological, environmental, or something else entirely, the calm narration emphasizes the emotional quality of their testimony, their certainty that they had briefly stepped outside their own time. From Versailles, the narrative drifts into similar accounts from pilots, hikers, and travelers. Some pilots have reported flying over landscapes that appear anachronistic, villages, forests, or coastlines that do not match any modern map. By the time they circle back, the landscape has returned to normal. Hikers occasionally describe wandering into areas where the air feels unusually still, the colors muted, and the sense of time muted or heightened. Some report glimpsing old-fashioned settlements or hearing distant sounds that vanish abruptly, leaving behind only an overwhelming sense of displacement. These experiences often last only seconds or minutes, yet linger in memory with vivid clarity. The narration gently acknowledges the scientific and psychological perspectives. Time perception is deeply tied to the brain's processing of sensory information. Disorientation, fatigue, or environmental conditions can distort the sense of duration and place. Yet despite these explanations, certain accounts remain too structured, too precise, and too consistent across different witnesses to be easily dismissed. It is in this contrast between rational theory and lingering anomaly that the listener finds the quiet beauty of the mystery. The journey then touches on chronological echoes, moments when events seem to imprint themselves on a location in such a way that they replay for witnesses decades or centuries after they occurred. Some refer to these as residual hauntings. Others describe them as recordings of the past embedded in the environment. Soldiers marching silently down an empty road, wagon wheels creaking across a bridge, or a fleeting glimpse of an entire street appearing in its historical form. These accounts blend time, memory, and landscape into a single phenomenon. The narration remains gentle, highlighting not fear, but the serene strangeness of witnessing something that should belong to a different chapter of history. The section moves into a broader reflection on the nature of time. Science has shown that time is not as fixed as it appears. It can stretch, bend, and dilate under extreme conditions. From the warping effects of gravity to the counterintuitive principles of quantum mechanics, the universe holds many surprises about how time behaves. While these scientific ideas do not directly explain time slips, they create a context in which the idea of temporal anomalies feels less impossible. The listener is encouraged to drift through these thoughts softly, without pressure to draw conclusions. The narrative then returns to grounded examples, stories of individuals who experience time loss or sudden jumps in awareness. Some describe walking through a doorway and emerging in a place that feels subtly altered, as though a few minutes pass somewhere beyond normal perception. Others claim to have lost hours with no memory of what occurred, despite leaving behind no physical evidence of movement or activity. In a sleep-friendly tone, the narration presents these moments as gentle disruptions, like ripples on the surface of a calm lake. Another intriguing phenomenon explored here is the appearance of objects from one era in another. Occasionally, archaeologists uncover items too modern for the layers in which they were found. Though many have rational explanations, a small number remain puzzling. Conversely, people in modern settings sometimes report encountering objects that appear centuries old, only for them to vanish or become untraceable afterward. Whether these are coincidences, misidentifications, or something more unusual, they contribute to the subtle texture of the world's temporal mysteries. As the section deepens, the tone becomes more meditative. The idea of time as a straight line begins to soften, Perhaps time is layered, like pages stacked together, and occasionally those pages brush against one another. Or perhaps human perception sometimes slips just enough to catch glimpses of another moment preserved in the folds of the universe. The narration leaves these possibilities open, inviting the listener to settle into the comfort of not knowing. As the section approaches its final moments, the narrative begins transitioning toward the next theme. If time can bend or overlap, creating glimpses of other eras, then what are the places that seem to vanish, appear, or rearrange themselves entirely? The mysteries of time often overlap with the mysteries of place. Roads that disappear, buildings that appear only once, landscapes that shift when no one is watching. With this gentle shift, the section concludes by leading the listener toward the next exploration. Doors, pathways, and structures that open briefly into the unexplained before fading back into the ordinary world. Some mysteries live in the sky and others in the passages of time, but there are also those rooted in place. Locations that behave like fleeting illusions, structures that appear only once, and pathways that vanish the moment they are crossed. In this section, the listener is guided through the quiet, haunting world of phantom architecture and disappearing roads. These are not violent or frightening phenomena. Instead, they carry a gentle eeriness, like walking through a dream where familiar rules feel slightly altered. The tone remains soft and atmospheric, allowing the mysteries to drift into awareness with the delicate weight of fog settling across a midnight landscape. The journey begins with accounts of people stumbling upon entire villages or buildings that seem to flicker briefly into existence. Travelers in rural regions of Europe and Asia have described coming upon silent towns with no sound, no movement, and no sign of life, only to discover later that no such town exists. Their descriptions often include vivid detail, the slant of rooftops, the style of windows, the texture of cobblestone streets. Yet when they return, the landscape is empty, untouched, and bewilderingly unfamiliar. These stories evoke a sense of slipping into a parallel moment, as though stepping unknowingly through a doorway, connecting two versions of reality that briefly overlapped. From these ghostly villages, the narrative moves into forests and mountains where disappearing pathways are often reported. Hikers describe following clear trails that suddenly dissolve into dense undergrowth, leaving them disoriented in a place that moments earlier felt structured and safe. Others recount walking down roads that appear perfectly normal, only to find themselves emerging into locations that defy distance or direction. Some paths seem to loop endlessly, while others lead to sudden, inexplicable dead ends. While natural causes, such as shifting foliage or misperception, offer partial explanations, many witnesses insist that the paths they followed were unmistakably constructed and then inexplicably gone. The tone remains calming as the narration explores legends of roads that choose their travelers. In some cultures, these pathways are believed to appear only to certain individuals, often during moments of emotional intensity or deep contemplation. These roads are said to guide wanderers toward revelations, warnings, or transformative experiences. Whether rooted in folklore or perception, these stories highlight the profound relationship between human consciousness and the landscapes we move through. A road is more than a route. It is a dialogue between place and person, and sometimes that dialogue takes unexpected, mysterious forms. Next, attention turns to phantom architecture, buildings that appear solid and real, yet leave no trace when approached or revisited. One famous example involves reports of a large, illuminated mansion seen by travelers who later discovered that no such structure had ever been built in the region. In other cases, people speak of ancient temples appearing amid dense vegetation, glowing faintly as though illuminated from within, only to vanish upon closer inspection. Such accounts are often framed as illusions, atmospheric reflections, or misunderstandings, but the remarkable detail in many descriptions leaves room for wonder. These buildings, whether real or imagined, evoke a sense of stepping momentarily into a forgotten slice of history or a timeline that never fully materialized. The narrative gently introduces the possibility that environmental conditions, light, mist, temperature, and perspective, can create mirage-like phenomena. Superior mirages, for example, can project distant objects onto the horizon in distorted or elevated forms, making them appear closer or entirely transformed. Yet even with scientific explanations available, many phantom architecture accounts include elements that go beyond what mirages typically produce. Listeners are invited to hold space for ambiguity, acknowledging that the world's atmospheric dynamics can create extraordinary illusions, while also accepting that some experiences resist neat classification. Another layer of mystery emerges from reports of doors or openings appearing briefly in natural or urban settings. These doors are often described as ordinary, a simple wooden frame, a stone archway, or a narrow passage in a rock wall. Yet they lead nowhere. Some witnesses claim to have stepped through only to find themselves in the same place they started, as though the doorway looped back upon itself. Others describe feeling compelled to turn away, sensing that the door was not meant to be crossed. These accounts, whether psychological or physical, mirror themes found across cultures, thresholds that separate the known world from realms of possibility. Throughout the section, the narration emphasizes the emotional quality of these experiences. People who encounter phantom roads or buildings rarely describe fear. Instead, they speak of a soft, surreal detachment, as though drifting through a dream. This calm disorientation enhances the sleep-friendly tone of the documentary, allowing listeners to imagine themselves walking along these quiet, shifting landscapes, feeling the subtle strangeness beneath their feet. The section also draws connections to historical events where entire structures were recorded once and never seen again. Explorers in the 19th century documented temples, villages, and stone outcroppings that later expeditions failed to locate. Scholars sometimes attribute this to mapping errors or incomplete descriptions. Yet some of these accounts were precise, detailed, and corroborated by multiple travelers. These lost structures become symbols of the Earth's vastness, a reminder that even in an age of satellites and digital maps, some places remain elusive, appearing only when they choose to be seen. As the section deepens, the narration moves toward a philosophical reflection on space and perception. Human understanding of place relies on consistency. Roads stay where roads are built, buildings remain anchored to their foundations, and landscapes shift slowly over centuries. When something violates this unspoken agreement, even subtly, it creates a ripple of mystery. Phantom architecture and vanishing pathways remind us that our relationship with space is mediated through perception, a perception that is capable of bending, misinterpreting, or briefly revealing something extraordinary. As the section approaches its conclusion, the transition into the next theme begins to form naturally. If the world around us can shift in ways we do not expect, if doors can appear without destinations and roads can dissolve beneath our feet, then perhaps the mind itself plays a role in shaping these experiences. The boundaries between external phenomena and internal perception grow thin, inviting a deeper exploration of how consciousness contributes to the mysteries we encounter. With this gentle shift, the narrative prepares to guide the listener into the next section, where the mysteries turn inward, exploring the strange and sometimes unexplainable experiences that arise from the depths of the human mind. There are mysteries that dwell in the external world, strange lights, vanished pathways, forgotten civilizations. But there are others that originate within us, shaped by the quiet, intricate workings of the human mind. In this section, the listener is invited into a gentler, more introspective realm where the unexplained emerges not from distant landscapes, but from perception itself. These are the experiences that blur the boundary between inner and outer reality, where the mind becomes both witness and creator of phenomena that defy simple understanding. The tone remains soft and reflective, encouraging curiosity rather than fear as we explore how our senses sometimes step outside the expected. The journey begins with the phenomenon of shared dreams, moments when multiple people report dreaming the same scene, the same figure, or the same sequence of events. While dreams are inherently personal, rooted in individual memory and emotion, these rare coincidences have been documented in families, close-knit communities, and even strangers connected only through circumstance. Scientists propose psychological synchrony or environmental cues, yet the precision of these shared experiences often goes beyond what coincidence can easily explain. The narration guides listeners to consider the possibility that human minds may sometimes align in subtle and mysterious ways, allowing unconscious experiences to overlap like ripples merging on a still lake. From dreams, the narrative drifts into the world of auditory mysteries, sounds that seem to have no physical source. Across the globe, people have reported hearing low-frequency hums, soft choruses, or mechanical buzzing that others around them cannot detect. Known as the global hum, this phenomenon remains one of modern science's quiet enigmas. Some attribute it to distant industrial noise, geological resonance, or inner ear irregularities. Yet many who experience it describe the sound as external, persistent, and strangely localized. The calm narration highlights how such sensations blur the line between perception and reality, revealing how the mind interprets stimuli in ways that sometimes elude explanation. The exploration continues with mass hallucination events, moments when groups of people simultaneously perceive something that later cannot be verified. These occurrences often happen in times of heightened emotion, stress, or expectation, such as during cultural festivals or historical turning points. While psychology offers partial explanations, there is something hauntingly beautiful about the idea that collective emotion can manifest shared imagery, like a temporary projection of human fear or hope. Listeners are reminded that perception is not just an individual process. It can be influenced by the presence, energy, and beliefs of others. Next, the narration turns toward visual illusions that appear in everyday life. Glimpses of figures in the corner of one's eye, motion in stillness, or shadows that seem to shift without a source. These experiences are often dismissed as tricks of the mind, yet their consistent appearance across cultures and generations suggests a deeper, universal phenomenon. The brain, constantly processing vast amounts of information, sometimes fills sensory gaps with imagined forms or movements. While this is a normal function, the results can feel strangely lifelike, leaving witnesses with the sense that they briefly encountered something beyond their understanding. The section also touches on moments when perception behaves unusually during meditation, exhaustion, or emotional intensity. In these states, the mind becomes more sensitive, its internal filters weakened. People may hear voices calling their names, see lights behind closed eyes, or feel the presence of someone nearby. These experiences are not necessarily signs of danger or disorder. Rather, they reveal how deeply perception is tied to psychological state. The calm narration encourages listeners to view these moments with gentleness, recognizing them as part of the mind's complexity rather than anomalies to fear. As the section deepens, the theme becomes clear. The mind is capable of producing experiences that feel external, real, and vivid. And because these experiences do not leave physical evidence, they exist in a liminal space, 1 foot in reality, 1 foot in imagination. This liminality mirrors the mysteries explored in earlier sections, suggesting that some unexplained phenomena may be collaborations between the environment and the mind interpreting it. As the section draws to a close, the transition to the next theme forms naturally. If the mind can create or amplify mysteries from within, then what happens when external encounters blur into psychological experience? What happens when people report seeing figures, entities, or presences that seem to exist at the very edge of reason? With this soft shift, the narrative prepares to guide the listener into Section 13, where encounters at the threshold of consciousness begin to take shape. Mysteries that are part psychological, part cultural, and entirely unforgettable. There are moments when the boundaries between waking and dreaming, reality and perception, feel thin enough to touch. In these liminal spaces, during the quiet hours of the night, in states of exhaustion, or in places heavy with atmosphere, people throughout history have reported encounters with figures that seem neither fully physical nor entirely imagined. In this section, the listener is guided gently into the world of these threshold experiences. Shadowy beings, fleeting silhouettes, nighttime visitors, and entities woven from the fragile fabric between consciousness and the unknown. The tone remains calm and comforting, ensuring curiosity blooms without fear as we explore these encounters that live on the edge of reason. The journey begins with one of the most universal experiences, sleep paralysis. For countless generations, individuals have awakened to find themselves unable to move, a heavy pressure upon their chest, and the sense of a presence watching from the corner of the room. Some describe shadow-like beings standing near their bed. Others speak of whispering voices or figures gliding at the edge of vision. Modern science attributes much of this to the brain transitioning improperly between REM sleep and wakefulness, causing dreams to bleed into consciousness. Yet even with this explanation, the emotional power of these encounters cannot be diminished. They feel real enough that entire cultures have named these nighttime visitors. The old hag in Newfoundland, the Mara in Scandinavia, and similar figures across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Their consistency across geography and time underscores a shared human vulnerability during moments when the mind is awake, but the body remains frozen. From sleep paralysis, the narration drifts into encounters reported during extreme fatigue, isolation, or environmental stress, phenomena known as the third man factor. Explorers in the Arctic, mountaineers at great heights, and sailors lost at sea have described sensing an unseen companion guiding them, encouraging them, or simply walking beside them. These presences, often perceived as protective rather than threatening, blur the boundary between hallucination and intuition. They provide comfort in moments of danger, as though the mind creates a guardian figure to support survival. Listeners are invited to imagine how the mind, under duress, may reach outward into the unknown, crafting a companion that feels external even when born from the deepest recesses of human emotion. The narrative then turns to shadow figures, dark outlines that appear briefly in peripheral vision. Many people report seeing them during moments of quiet stillness, especially in dimly lit spaces. Unlike the more dramatic entities described in folklore, shadow figures are subtle, a flicker of movement, a silhouette where none should be. Some cultures interpret them as spirits, others as representations of inner fears or ancestral echoes. Psychologists suggest they may be misinterpretations of ordinary objects or the brain's tendency to fill gaps in low-light environments. Yet the calm narration emphasizes that the emotional impact of such sightings often lingers. Even if fleeting, these figures touch a primal part of perception, whispering of presences just beyond comprehension. The section moves deeper into historical accounts of nighttime visitors, entities reported in ancient texts, medieval manuscripts, and early explorer journals. Many cultures describe beings that approach during sleep or solitude, often appearing humanoid but with subtle differences. Eyes too large, movements too smooth, shapes too tall or too thin. These accounts, though separated by centuries and continents, share a striking similarity in tone. They describe the tightening of the air, a shift in temperature, or a sense of awareness that precedes the encounter. Whether literal beings or manifestations of the mind's shadowed corners, these stories reveal an enduring pattern in human experience. Next, the narration explores cultural interpretations of these encounters. In some traditions, these figures are seen as protectors or messengers, in others, as omens or tricksters. The The diversity of meanings shows how the human mind seeks to frame the unknown within familiar symbolic structures. A figure seen during sleep paralysis may be interpreted as a spiritual visitation in one culture and as a neurological glitch in another. Yet the emotional core remains the same, the feeling of being witnessed by something that exists outside normal perception. The calm narration continues with modern reports. Stories from individuals who describe seeing figures at the edges of forests, hallways, abandoned buildings, or lonely roads. These encounters rarely include direct interaction. Instead, they leave behind a sense of being observed, as though the figure retreats when noticed. Some describe the presence as curious, others as neutral, and only rarely as threatening. This variance suggests that the encounter may reflect the inner emotional state of the witness as much as any external phenomenon. The listener is invited to consider that such beings, whether real or imagined, serve as mirrors for the mind's unspoken fears, hopes, or unresolved tensions. As the exploration deepens, the narration touches gently on encounters that occur during moments of transition between life and death, health and illness, or consciousness and unconsciousness. Individuals recovering from near-death experiences often describe meeting beings of light or shadow, figures that communicate without words, or presences that feel deeply familiar. These accounts, filtered through culture and personal belief, offer a profound look into the mind's attempt to understand overwhelming experiences. Whether spiritual or psychological, they provide comfort to many, suggesting continuity and connection during life's most vulnerable moments. The section then reflects on the universality of these experiences. Across humanity, across history, and across geography, people have described encounters that defy logic but resonate emotionally. These beings, shadowy, luminous, comforting, or enigmatic, inhabit the borderlands of perception where the mind interprets sensations that do not fit neatly into ordinary categories. They challenge the idea that reality is always stable, revealing how human awareness can expand and contract in ways that momentarily open windows into the extraordinary. As the section approaches its gentle closing, the transition emerges organically. If encounters at the edge of reason can leave such deep impressions, if they can shape stories, beliefs, and personal narratives, then it becomes clear that some mysteries do not fade with time. Instead, they linger, echoing across generations, becoming part of the landscape of human experience itself. With this thought, the narrative prepares to guide the listener into the next section, where echoes that refuse to fade, mysteries tied to place, memory, and continuity become the focus. Some mysteries do not announce themselves through dramatic events or startling encounters. Instead, they linger quietly in the background of history, repeating themselves across generations like distant echoes. These are the phenomena tied to specific places, sounds that recur without source, apparitions that appear to different people over centuries, and legends that refuse to disappear despite the passage of time. In this section, the listener is guided into a gentle exploration of these enduring echoes, subtle, persistent reminders that certain mysteries remain woven into the fabric of the world. The tone is soft, reflective, and soothing, encouraging contemplation rather than fear. The journey begins with places known for recurring sounds, locations where people repeatedly hear footsteps, music, voices, or mechanical hums despite no physical origin. These sounds often follow patterns, suggesting rhythm and intention, yet leave behind no evidence of their source. In some old buildings, footsteps echo along hallways that have been empty for decades. In certain fields, faint music drifts through the air at night, heard by locals for generations. While explanations such as acoustics, underground water movement, or atmospheric distortion offer partial clarity, many recordings still baffle researchers. These sounds become part of the identity of their locations, like memories embedded in the environment itself. From sound, the narrative shifts to recurring apparitions, figures, or scenes that multiple witnesses describe with remarkable consistency over spans of years or even centuries. These are not individual hallucinations or isolated experiences. Rather, they are patterns of perception tied to specific moments or places. Some travelers report seeing a lone figure on an old bridge, always turning to look back before fading away. Others describe watching the faint outline of a procession move silently across a hillside, the same path worn by pilgrims long ago. Such apparitions, whether interpreted as residual energy, memory imprints, or shared psychological expectation, reveal how certain events become etched into the collective awareness of a location. The narration then gently explores legends that refuse to fade, stories passed down through families and communities that retain their strength even when stripped of detail. These tales often describe unusual events, mysterious travelers, hidden treasures, or unexplained disappearances. Although the specifics may shift over time, the core remains intact, carried forward by countless retellings. These legends act like cultural anchors, connecting present-day listeners to the beliefs, fears, and hopes of those who lived before them. They are proof that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some exist simply to remind us of the human impulse to make meaning from the unknown. Next, the section turns to environmental mysteries, places where light patterns, weather shifts, or unusual natural behavior occur repeatedly and predictably. Marshes that glow faintly at night, mountains where strange flickers appear near the summit, and coastlines where ghostly ships are reported again and again. While science can explain some phenomena, such as bioluminescence or atmospheric reflections, others remain less clear. Yet the goal of this narrative is not to dismiss or confirm, but to appreciate the gentle strangeness of these recurring mysteries. They contribute to the character of their landscapes, turning ordinary places into quiet repositories of wonder. Throughout the section, the narration highlights a central theme: persistence. These echoes, whether sounds, visions, or stories, do not fade because they're continually reinforced by new witnesses or new interpretations. They survive because they resonate with something universal in the human experience: the desire to connect with the past, to understand our surroundings, and to find patterns in the unknown. Even when explanations emerge, the emotional imprint remains, allowing the mystery to persist in a softer, symbolic form. As the section nears its close, a gentle transition begins to form. If some mysteries echo across time, rippling through generations, then perhaps the world itself is shaped by these enduring unknowns. They remind us that understanding is never absolute, and that the boundary between the known and the mysterious is always shifting. These echoes, subtle yet persistent, prepare the listener for the documentary's final reflection, a step back from the individual mysteries to consider what they collectively reveal about our world. With this soft shift, the narrative opens the door to Section 15, where the story comes full circle and the listener is invited to contemplate what we still do not know, and why the unknown remains such a vital part of human experience. Even after exploring footprints that should not exist, artifacts ahead of their time, landscapes that bend the rules of nature, memories without origins, and encounters at the edge of consciousness, we arrive at a simple, humbling truth: the world remains far more mysterious than we allow ourselves to believe. In this final section, the listener is invited into a meditative reflection on the vastness of the unknown, a calm acknowledgement that despite all our advancements, discovery, and knowledge, countless mysteries still breathe quietly beneath the surface of reality. These mysteries do not diminish humanity. They enrich the story of our existence, offering beauty, awe, and a reminder that certainty is not the end goal of understanding. The journey begins by revisiting the central theme that is gently threaded through every section: the contrast between what is known and what remains hidden. Science, history, psychology, and culture all provide tools for interpreting the world, yet each tool has its limitations. The mysteries we have explored, whether ancient, environmental, biological, or psychological. Each occupies spaces where those tools falter. This is not a failure of human understanding, but a natural consequence of living in a world too vast and too intricate to be fully charted. Listeners are encouraged to feel comfort, not discomfort, in this realization. The unknown is not a void to fear, but a horizon inviting curiosity. The narration reflects on how human knowledge has expanded dramatically over the centuries. Civilizations that vanished without explanation may now reveal their stories through archaeology, and aerial phenomena once described as celestial omens can now be analyzed with modern instruments. Yet even with these advancements, the mysteries themselves have not disappeared. Instead, they transform, evolve, and reappear in new forms. When one question is answered, another emerges. This cyclical nature of discovery reveals that mystery is not a glitch in the human experience. It is a built-in feature. No matter how much we learn, there will always be another layer beneath the one we just uncovered. As the reflection deepens, the narration turns toward the emotional resonance of mystery. Humans are not only seekers of knowledge, we are also creators of meaning. The unknown allows for imagination, storytelling, spirituality, and wonder. It shapes entire genres of art and literature. It fuels scientific exploration. It encourages us to look beyond the surface of things. The mysteries we have explored, footprints in impossible eras, luminous valleys, voices in the mind, echoes in forgotten places, all serve the same purpose. They remind us that life is far more complex, beautiful, and subtle than we typically perceive in our day-to-day routines. The section then reflects on how modern life often pushes mystery aside, prioritizing logic, routine, and efficiency. Yet in quiet moments, late at night, in unfamiliar environments, or during emotional transitions, the unknown softly reemerges. It may appear as a fleeting feeling that time has shifted, the sense that someone unseen is near, or the recognition that a place carries memories that do not belong to us. These experiences are not disruptions. They are gentle reminders that we are participants in a vast, interconnected reality that stretches far beyond individual understanding. The narration continues by examining how mystery shapes human humility. In a world where technology gives the illusion of control, the mysteries of nature, consciousness, and time offer a grounding counterbalance. They remind us that we are not the architects of reality, but travelers within it. Ancient people lived with a deep sense of awe, aware that much of the natural world was unknown. Modern humans often forget this, yet the mysteries explored in this documentary bring that awareness back into focus. They encourage us to move through life with curiosity rather than certainty, wonder rather than dismissal. As the section moves forward, the narration draws connections between different types of mysteries. The footprint in the ancient stone, the moving rocks of the desert, the glowing valley lights, the stranger who appeared without a past, the hum that vibrates in the silence. Each mystery, though distinct, shares something in common. It touches the boundaries of perception and challenges established narratives. These anomalies do not dismantle our understanding of reality. Instead, they expand it. They demonstrate that truth is not a fixed structure, but a living, evolving landscape. The reflection deepens into the idea that embracing mystery is part of embracing life itself. Without unanswered questions, the world would lose its depth. Without things that defy explanation, imagination would wither. Without the unknown, there would be no exploration, no innovation, no sense of wonder. The mysteries we have explored remind us that life is not a puzzle meant to be solved completely, but a story meant to be experienced with openness and curiosity. The narration then gently turns toward the future. As technology advances, satellite imaging, AI analysis, quantum research, we may solve some of the world's long-standing mysteries. Yet new mysteries will arise. For every anomaly explained, countless others will emerge from the oceans, the skies, the deep earth, or the human mind. Some mysteries may even grow deeper as new knowledge challenges old assumptions. This ongoing cycle ensures that the world will always remain a place of awe and discovery. The section also offers a soft invitation to the listener to notice the small mysteries in daily life. The dream that feels too vivid, the familiar sensation in an unfamiliar place, the déjà vu that arrives without warning, the moment of intuition that proves correct, the sudden stillness that feels meaningful. These experiences may not become part of folklore or documentation, but they belong to the same realm of quiet wonder as the great mysteries of history. They are reminders that each person's journey intersects with the unknown in subtle, personal ways. As the closing reflection nears, the narration shifts into a calming, poetic tone. It acknowledges that humans often seek answers to feel safe, yet sometimes it is the questions that provide comfort. There is a serenity in accepting that not everything must be solved. Like stars shimmering in the night sky, mysteries give depth to the darkness. They offer perspective. They remind us that we are part of something vast, ancient, and extraordinary. The unknown is not an enemy. It is a companion that walks with us through time. Finally, the section brings the entire documentary full circle. From impossible footprints to echoes across centuries, from vanishing paths to strange encounters, each mystery has offered a glimpse into the greater tapestry of existence. And as the listener reaches the end of this long journey, the narration leaves them with a final, peaceful thought that the world remains endlessly mysterious, not because logic fails, but because reality itself is larger than our understanding. In the soft quiet that follows, the listener is encouraged to rest, not with answers, but with wonder. For in the embrace of the unknown, we find one of the most beautiful truths of all. That mystery is what keeps the world alive, and curiosity is what keeps us connected to it.